write, was a military brat. So she grew up in places like Montgomery, Alabama, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Rome, as in Roma, Italy. Yes. Okay. Stuttgart and Syracuse. It's quite a combination. She's a graduate of Ithaca College, George Washington University, and the University of Maine Law School. She took up writing, and I heard this the other night, and it's so often women in particular talk about how, let me say the sentence first, that she was a stay-at-home mother of two when she started writing. There was I'm just going to digress for 1 second, but there was an artist that I knew in the 80s named Reba Morton, and she was a very influential artist because she did things that people considered women's things, like knickknacks and stuff. But Marcia Tucker of the Whitney Museum, and then the founder of the new museum, used to go around to places like army posts to find women artists that she, couldn't find other places. And she discovered Reba Morton and gave her an exhibition actually at the Whitney Museum. And it changed really a way that people thought about how art was made. Anyhow, it reminded me when I just am reading this about Julia, and that she was a stay-at-home mom. She took the time to finish her first novel while she had a full-time job. Mentioned, I don't know what happened, but then she decided to have the third child. I don't know, but she did not want to write a lawyer sleuth. So she used her army past and created a really unique protagonist, Claire Ferguson, who is an Episcopal priest in an Adirondack town. The resulting books have been nominated for almost every American award, mystery award, the Edgar, the Anthony, and the Agatha. Her next book, which is out like in 2 days or something, or 3 days, right? Or any minute?
Five days?
Okay, it's a countdown, but you can get it here. Evil Days. I will note that happily, I think you have stopped practicing the law.
Yes.
You're just writing.
Happily for me.
Okay. Still on my right, Reba White Williams, who actually I had heard about for years and years through mutual friends in the finance industry. And I always heard about this mysterious Reba and Dave and how fantastic they were. And I met them, and it was true. Reba White Williams worked for more than 30 years in business and finance, in research at McKinsey & Company, as a security analyst on Wall Street, and as a senior executive at an investment management firm. She graduated from Duke with a BA in English, earned an MBA at Harvard, a PhD in art history at CUNY, and an MA in writing at Antioch. Now that is a pretty okay resume, right? And in her spare time, she has written numerous articles for art and financial journals. She's the past president of the New York City Art Commission and served on the New York State Council for the Arts. She and her husband Dave built what is considered to be one of the largest private collections of fine art prints by American artists. They've created 17 exhibitions from their collection that have circulated to more than 100 museums around the world. Reba Williams has written most of those exhibition catalogs. If you're lucky enough to get to their New York apartment, you can see just a sampling of those amazing prints. She's been a member of the print community of several leading museums. When you hear her speak, you will undoubtedly know right away that she grew up somewhere below the Mason-Dixon line in North Carolina, though she's lived in New York for quite a while. New York, Connecticut, and Southern California with her husband Dave and their Maltese Muffin. So, is the dog downstairs? Okay. Reba's first novel, Restrike, which is an art world thriller, came out when? June 1, and her second novel, Fatal Impressions, will be coming out
April 22nd.
April 22nd. So has not wasted any time. What I want to say is that tonight, what these two women are going to do is they're both going to read for about, neither one of them really wanted to very much. I've asked them to read for about 2 minutes each, just so that you can hear some of the language in their writing. after that, they're going to have a conversation, talk about how they met, why they chose crime fiction or why it chose them, what it's like to be starting out in the crime fiction world as Reba is, as opposed to being a more seasoned writer with 8 novels under her belt, like Julia. I also hope they will talk about, and you can ask these questions if they do not get to them, why women choose to write about crime and how that's different from when men write about crime. Also, once we have finished, please join us for drinks, snacks, books are in the back to be bought and signed. And take it away first. I'm going to ask. You see, it's already starting. I think we're going to ask the newer writer, Reba White Williams, to read just a little bit from Restrike.
That's Jonathan. I didn't bring my book down, so it's really good.
Are you going to act it out?
I could.
I'm going to go there. Which one do you want?
It's always good to read from the latest.
Both of us would rather talk than read.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Restrike is a cozy, and for anyone who doesn't know what I mean by that, you don't see a really bloody body on the floor, and the sex is not so obvious that you feel like you have to be in the bed with them. It's more a quieter kind of mystery. But that's not to say that you won't get scared. All of us who are writing mysteries want you to be a little bit scared and staying up a little bit at night. And I'm going to lose this hat for sure.
I can feel mine slipping already. You go ahead and take it off if you need to.
David, I'll put them on.
I am going to read just a little bit from this, from Restrike. And I would say that Coleman and Dinah Green are their cousins from North Carolina who come to New York and work in the art world. And on this particular evening, they had been to a large opening at a museum, and they had heard while there that someone they know, a good friend, has been killed. And they leave, obviously they're very upset, and Coleman wants to go back to their office because this person who is killed works for her, and she wants to know where he's been and what he's been doing because something just doesn't make a lot of sense. So they're up, and picture this, it's a Sunday night, and it's been snowing, so it's very quiet, there's very little traffic, and they come up in this dark building up to the floor where they're the only people in it. And they're in the conference room, and they're talking about what they should do and what they could do about their friend. Coleman cocked her head and cupped her hand behind her ear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Dinah looked up. "What?" Coleman put a finger to her lips. "Shh, the elevator. It stopped on this floor. Nobody should be coming here this time of night." "One of the staff? Cleaning crew?" Coleman shook her head. "On Sunday night, I've never seen anyone cleaning here on Sunday during the day, let alone at night. The guard downstairs knows we're here. He should have called me to tell me someone was coming up. The switchboard's off, but security has my cell phone number. Whoever it is must have sneaked past the guard. Why didn't the elevator man let me know? I don't want to scare you, but it must be someone up to no good. I'll turn off the lights if it's a burglar, or worse. I'd rather he not know that we're here. Take your things and get under the table. I'll lock the door to the conference room." Dinah did as she was told. Coleman switched off the conference room lights, locked the door to the hall, and crawled under the table to join Dinah. Dinah reached out for Coleman's hand. "Listen," Coleman whispered. "Whoever it is, just open the door from the elevator corridor into the reception room. He has a key or a card with access to the access code." Footsteps approached the conference room, and the door handle rattled. They froze at the sound of someone entering the code that unlocked the conference room door. The overhead lights came on. All Dinah could see was a pair of black trousered legs and feet in highly polished black shoes. "Okay, You want to know what happens? Buy the book.
Always leave them with a cliffhanger. That's all right. Yeah, I'm going to put mine sort of like a lounge singer. Okay, so I was leaving. I have, since this book is just coming out, I've actually only done a few readings, like 2 of it, but I think probably the best thing to do is I'm going to read you the very beginning of show the book, Through the Evil Days, available in 5 bookstores everywhere in the next 3 days. Okay, so you don't have to know anything about it. The dog's barking woke Michaela up. Ted and Helen, she was supposed to call them Uncle Ted and Aunt Helen, but she never did inside her own head, had told her Oscar was really a sweet dog. And it was true, he never growled at her. He was so big, though, with his tail going thunk, 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 and his long pink tongue and his stabby white teeth. Michaela didn't care how sweet he was, he scared her. Right now, his big, deep bark was booming over and over and over again. Michaela burrowed beneath her quilts and pulled a pillow over her head. "Shut up, stupid dog," she whispered. She waited for the thud of Ted and Helen's bedroom door, footsteps on the stairs. It sounded like Oscar had to go bad. She shivered. What if the McCallans didn't do anything? She would have to let him out. That was the rule. Then she'd have to stand around in the freezing hallway till he pooped and she could let him back in. She pushed her pillow away and scooted up. It sounded like the dog was already outside. Maybe Ted had let him out and fallen asleep. Grown-ups could sleep through anything. There had been times Michaela had to talk to her mom before the bus came in the morning, and she'd shake her, and Mom still didn't do anything but mumble and roll over. She climbed out of bed and put on her booties and her robe. The McCallans had given them to her the afternoon she had come out of the hospital. The robe was pink and woolly, and the booties had real sheepskin inside, which was good, because the McCallans' old house was always cold. She missed her mom's apartment. She could spend all Saturday watching TV in her shorty pajamas. It was so warm inside. Michaela opened the bedroom door and wrinkled her nose. The hallway stank like a gas station. The nightlight was out. Moonlight streamed from Ted and Helen's open door at the other end of the hall, and for a second she thought about trying to get one of them to let Oscar in, but they might be bad if she woke them up. She clung to the railing as she walked down the unlit stairs. The stink was even worse in the front hall. She had her hand on the doorknob to let Oscar in when someone said, "Wait." She screamed, "Shh, shh, Michaela, it's me." She caught her breath at the familiar voice. "You scared me." There was a clank, like a pail setting on the floor, and then a figure moved out of the deep dark of the living room to the shadowy gray of the hall. "I'm sorry. I'm here to take you to your mom." "My mom?" Her heart was going bumpity-bump. She wasn't sure if it was from a fright or from the idea of seeing her mom. "Really?" "Yes, I was just coming upstairs to get you." "But," she frowned, "it's the middle of the night. Are you supposed to be here?" "Look, do you want to stay here with them? Fine by me, I'll just leave." "No, wait," Michaela stumbled toward the living room. "I want to go. I want to see my mom." "I don't know, maybe I made a mistake coming to get you." No, just let me, I have a suitcase, I'll get my clothes and then we can go." "I'll get your clothes. You go get my car. It's in the driveway. I'll be there in a minute." "Can I take my coat and my book bag? They're right here." Yes, Jesus." She snatched them off their hooks and opened the door. Oscar's barking got wilder. "And don't let the dog in." Michaela shut the door behind her and ran along the narrow shoveled path to the drive. Oscar, standing in the snow, whined as she passed him, but he didn't do anything to stop her. She jumped in the back seat of the waiting car and slammed the door. She sat, shaking from excitement and fear, her arms wrapped around her book bag. She was going to see her mom again. It had been so long. Then she had an awful thought. Her recorder, she had left it in the bedroom, and Monday was music class. If she forgot it again, Miss Clausen would kill her. She could run back and get it. She knew right where it was. It wouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. That would be okay. She bit her lip and opened the door, slipped out. She left the door open. That would prove she was coming right back. She had taken 3 or 4 steps towards the house when she heard a whumping noise. Oscar stopped barking and lay in the snow. In the black, moonlit, moon-blank windows, she saw something orange, red, Kindle. It was far back, like something in the kitchen maybe. Oscar whined again. The door slammed. For a second she thought, it's Ted. He's coming to stop me. He's coming to get me. He's going to save me. But she could see it wasn't Ted McCallan at all. The orange-red glow grew brighter. Oscar sprang up.
Jonathan gave us a whole list of suggested conversational topics that I've now completely forgotten. So,
One I know was how we met, and I want to tell that.
oh, how we met? Yes.
Yes. I was going to be talking about wind strike in Maine, and we've got a mutual friend back there, Claire. We brought you a hat. You haven't got it on.
Sorry. I didn't want to block anybody's view. I'm right in front of the camera.
Anyway, and Claire, I talked to Claire about it, and Claire said, yes, I think it will be difficult because I'm a new writer, and they're not going to know you. I mean, there's just a chance that nobody will turn up. It is an awful thing if you're a writer and you're in a bookstore and nobody comes. And she said, I'll get a friend to come and be with you. And the person I have in mind is very well known in Maine and is a very popular writer. And that means that they'll come out to see her, and you'll be lucky because you're there. And the person that came was Julia. And I've heard of this before, and that how good other writers can be to beginners. It's unlike a lot of businesses where they really aren't very nice to beginners. But Julia dropped everything to whatever she was doing, and I'm sure she's busy all the time to come. And we had the best time.
We did.
There were people there, and we did spend a lot of time talking to each other, and they did ask questions, as we hope you all will. And that's how we met.
It was about as good a time as you could have without bourbon being involved. It was a good one. Well, when I started out, I was a recipient of a lot of help. I was first published in 2002 is when my first book came out. And as is frequently the case, I write a mystery series, so they're all linked together. And I wound up getting published, that's the publishing story, because I entered a contest. Minotaur Books, a Macmillan imprint, publishes me. They are the largest publisher of mysteries in the United States today, and they were back then. It was a contest that is still going on. Anyone can enter. And I think the deadline might be tonight. When I did it, the deadline was Halloween. So if you've got a manuscript, leave now, rush home, get it date stamped. Yeah. And so I was in the very fortunate circumstance of actually starting out when I won the contest, getting offered a book contract without having an agent first or anything like that, and then. About 6 weeks later, getting offered a second book contract for the next book in the series, and it sort of went on. It wasn't until I actually had an offer for a third and fourth book that I actually went out and got an agent. But the whole time at the very beginning, I was getting lots and lots of support from my fellow mystery authors. It's surprising. I remember being at a dinner once. It was at a mystery conference in Birmingham, Alabama, and they took us out to dinner, and it's this huge thing. We're all sitting, and we got talking, as you do at dinners, about spouses and things. And there was this huge number. There were probably 20 authors sitting around the table, and this very statistically improbable number had been married to the same spouse for a lengthy period of time.
Oh, not the same sex.
That's the same. Really statistically improbable. But an excellent plot for a murder mystery. Very good. I like that one. And so we decided, and we all had these very boring, kind of stable home lives with our spouses and our dogs and stuff there. And I think that there's something about getting out all of those murderous, you spend killing people on page, figuring out how to kill and get away with it. And it just kind of releases something. So when you go downstairs from your office, you can say, "Hi, honey." Which makes me think that maybe romance authors are probably, just this close to killing their spouses at any moment. I mean, you'd just be surrounded with all that love and goodness all the time. It'd make you want to, like that.
Well, one of the things that we found that we had in common, Julia was a military mover around, and my father was in highway construction, and I lived in every town in Mississippi before I was 10 years old. And then we also spent a little time in Tennessee and a little time here, there, and everywhere. And it does tend to make you flexible.
Yes.
You just never are anywhere long enough to get stubborn about anything. And I do think that it also helps when you're thinking about writing a book, because all of that change, somehow it stays back there that you want to bring into your books. But I hadn't thought about it until I heard you talk about your background when you met that night in Maine.
About the changing and the, well, yeah, I think that I mean, who was it that said that there are only two plots? Somebody comes to town or somebody goes on a journey. And if you spend your childhood moving around, you have spent your childhood living that out. You're the stranger coming to town, or you're the person going on the journey. I also think that moving around helped make me such a book lover. I've always been a reader, as I know you have. I don't know any authors who are not voracious, passionate readers as well. I know people who say they want to be authors who are readers, but the people who actually are doing it are. And I think when you go from town to town and state to state or country to country, the books follow you. The books are the same. The little house is always on the prairie, no matter where you are. Narnia is always behind the same wardrobe door, even if you've changed and you're in a new city.
Yes, and then books more and more your friends, where you don't have friends because, somebody said that to me, but you poor thing, you probably never had friends. Well, I did for about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I think you rely more and more on books as the time goes on.
So then mystery. We both write mysteries. Why are we writing mystery instead of, I don't know, romance? Could be writing.
Yeah.
He ripped his shirt open, revealing his gleaming muscular chest.
Well, could you combine the two in one genre?
I actually do a lot. There's a lot of romance in my books. I have a very, very strong romantic subplot in my book because I actually like reading a really well-written romance. I like that. And, romance adds a lot of tension. You've got romance in your book as well. There is, of course, when you write a mystery, there's the tension of the mystery. What's going to happen? Is that mysterious guy with the black, legs, is he going to find the girls? Or is he going to kill him? But then you can't always be having people, being menaced by strange, unidentified men. Sometimes other things have to happen. And when you've got a romance going on in your book, that adds another type of tension. So if you're not worried about your heroine being killed, then you can worry about, well, will they? Won't they? When will they, if they do?
Well, we talked a little bit about romance in your book and the kind of letters and comments on it, and I thought that was wonderful because I have two young cousins, and one of them is the girl that I grew up with who thought that she would just sit around and wait till her prince came and she would get married, lived happily ever after. And she has found her prince and is it's not working out quite the way she thought. Meanwhile, her cousin Coben announces early on in the book that she will never marry, but she's up for flings, and she has some. But you've got a character that's got an ongoing romance that is what? How would you describe it?
Very morally ambiguous.
Yes.
I guess would be the word for it. Because in my books, the heroine, the female protagonist, is the town's brand new Episcopal priest. I am myself a lifelong Episcopalian, what we call cradle Episcopalian, and So Claire Ferguson is the priest, and she meets and strikes up a wonderful friendship with the town's very married chief of police. And it's only really at the end of the first book that she realizes that she, in fact, has fallen for him, and he has fallen for her. Which is actually one of the things I enjoy writing about are people who are kind of unreliable narrators in their own lives. They don't realize what's happening around them until it smacks them in the face. Which may be a little bit self-referential for me.
Please note that she said it was only at the end of the first book that this happened. Now, we're talking 8 books later. Or 7 books later.
Yeah.
And so this romance ripens and moves on, correct?
Yes, it does. We just keep on, it's something that they have to struggle with. And I was fascinated with it because I actually, seriously, I wanted to write a very grown-up situation, a very complicated adult situation. I've been married, happily married, I think, for 26 years. But you don't die, your eyes don't fall out. When you're married, you notice other people. Oh, he's very attractive, or, I really enjoy her company. So, what happens in this case where a couple accidentally, emotionally go over that line, and they don't want to move the goalposts, but they have these feelings for each other. And how do they deal with that? And how do they balance their commitments and the things that they have made promises to with their own feelings, which sounds like an odd kind of thing that to accompany murders, bludgeonings, arson, people being blown up, all of which have happened in my books. But I really believe that crime fiction provides the broadest canvas for literature today. I think people writing in crime fiction are writing about human relationships and social issues and really important things going on with class and with economy and with where the country is, in a way that a lot of other types of literature aren't touching on. It's just we try and make it interesting because there are dead bodies in it, so you keep on reading. Were you a mystery reader? Was that?
Yes, I was always a mystery reader, and I was fascinated by how they did it. Agatha Christie in particular is a person who just took you, to twist you and turned you and all of that, and I was always fascinated by that and thought someday that I would try to do this. And I got kind of trapped because I could actually get published nonfiction, and nobody was particularly interested in having me write a novel, including a number of my friends. And I will tell you that I was taken out to lunch by 2 very well-known female writers to say to me, we were here to try to get you not to write fiction. And I was kind of dumbfounded. They were fiction writers, kind of famous, one of them anyway. And I said, well, why not? And they said, because you've got a good life, and this is not going to be good. And one of them, I'll say who it was because she would certainly say it again, Susan Cheever. She said, you know what it is, it's like you have a baby, and you think this is the cutest, smartest, most wonderful baby that ever was, and then you put it out there, and everybody starts telling you how stupid and ugly your baby is. She said, you really feel terrible. And I said, you know what, I ran for office in New York City, nothing makes me feel terrible. And it's true. I mean, I have happily not had anybody tell me my baby is really ugly and awful, but it will come. I mean, I'm confident that, that somebody will, let me know how much they hate my books. I've had a lot of people tell me they hate my covers. Everywhere I go, people tell me they hate my covers. So
you know what? There are actually some famous, horrible covers where authors have gone on. Probably the most famous in the mystery world is Harlan Coben. Do any of you read Harlan Coben? What is this? Well, he is infamous for having, for his very first Myron Bolitar series books. Myron Bolitar is a sports agent, and he wrote a lot of his before he started doing his, suburban dad is threatened thrillers. And he has this book that everybody calls the Bloody Balls cover. Because the cover of this book is literally a bunch of different types of sports balls, a soccer ball, a baseball, a basketball, with blood poured over them. And this was the cover of his first book. It is, there are pictures, and and it's not even like a photograph. It's a bad cartoon of bloody balls. The least appealing, sort of thing that people would like actively avoid going near. And he managed to go back and be, international bestseller from that. So you can recover.
Yeah, I guess it's like that thing that I think it runs in an English magazine. The worst sex writing of the year.
Yeah.
And they'll just take you apart. Somebody who what they quoted and how horrible it was, and you think that person will go away and sneak and never try again, and I'm out of there back next year. So I guess that you just have to have a very thick skin no matter what you're writing.
I think there are people who, honestly, I think if I got, say, an award for, bad sex writing, I have a strong feeling that my publisher would say, it's an award, we're going to put it on the board. People will pick it up, let's go with it.
Is your publisher here?
I don't know. Publisher here, I don't see any, no. Should we do some questions before we really start going into the whole sex writing and which we could denigrate to? Yes.
I want to say that I'm not really normally a reader of mysteries, but my Episcopal priest said, well, I know this writer that you guys like, and she wrote this whole series, and she was telling me a little bit about it, and I said, well, give me the first one, and I'll give it a try. And so I read the first one, and I was like totally hooked, and so the long and short of it was I went through all 7 of them in relatively short order, and I truly enjoyed seeing your literary craft grow in each novel. And what was particularly interesting to me was that in the last one, it was like the backstory about the impact of the war on people who came back was so interesting on a human level that when it went to plot stuff, I was saying, oh no, it's plot stuff. So it was almost like this thing was threatening to step out of the mystery genre. And I was just wondering, what thoughts you have about that?
It's like with the sometimes I describe myself at this point as writing novels with mysteries in them, because I think people want a really good novel. They want really good characters that they can identify with. They want something that's sort of meaty and juicy. The thing about crime, having a mystery of crime in your novel, is it just ramps up the stakes. It makes it that much more important. It's that, murder is the ultimate breaking of the social contract. And, it tears apart the social fabric. And so it has that sort of importance that gives extra gravity to everything going on. So, plus, I can't seem to write without dead bodies showing up. So I think I will definitely be continuing in that vein.
What's that about?
My book's getting more thrillery than less traditional mystery. I think at this point in my writing career, what I do is I tend to balance books off of each other. I just realized this recently, now that this is my 8th one coming out, so I have enough to kind of look back. My previous book was very much about veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan coming back into a small town and trying to reintegrate themselves in society that wanted them to be who they were when they left, and they are not anymore. So it was very much an issue book. It had lots and lots of viewpoint characters. It was a big sprawling novel. And sort of as a reaction to that, the one that I've written now is very tightly focused. It's basically, I was telling, when I told my agent who was here tonight, she said, well, what's it going to be about? I said, it's going to be Russ and Claire in a cabin trapped with killers during an ice storm. It's like, boom, it's high concept. It's very, very tight. The next book, the one that I'm working on right now, is actually about, the book is about fathers and sons and the relationship that men have of men who are like fathers to them, fathers and mentors, and like sons to them. And eventually, I've got to figure out, the mystery. There's a dead body, and I have no idea how it got there, or who did it, or any of that, but at some point I'll have to figure it out. So there'll be that as well. So I really don't see it as moving in a more thriller-like direction. I see it as sort of reacting and writing. Every time I do a book, I want to write a different book. I want to stretch myself. I want to grow as a writer. I want to challenge myself. I figure if it ever starts getting boring for me, it's going to get boring for my readers. And there's nothing, you read lots of mysteries. You can tell when someone has just gotten bored with it.
Yeah.
When they're just kind of turning it in because they've got a contract.
Most of us who really like mysteries do series, and sometimes somebody gets tired in the middle of the series, and you'll find it, kind of just tapering off, and they're about to leave you.
Yeah.
Well, what do you feel, both of you, Reba's has now finished the second novel that's part of the series, right? And you have your 8th in the series. And so what you were saying, as so many mystery writers do write series, why do you think so? What does it give you? What problems does it present? All of the issues around keeping a series alive.
Well, I started right out when I first wrote the first book, thinking that it was going to be a series, and I had a huge number of long, and still do, of books planned. In the first place, I would like to have people say, oh gosh, there's another Coleman and Dinah book. Not another book by me, but be interested in the characters. And I followed the kind of plan that Agatha Christie, she was very unhappy that she had made Miss Marple so old to start with, because it was her favorite character, and she just couldn't keep her around very long. One was only 300 years old. I thought about that, and I opened Restrike, and when my characters are in their 30s. They're old enough to have gotten to New York and had jobs and so forth. But they're going to age very slowly. And that means that they can have lots and lots and lots of adventures in different places. This book is in New York, as is Fatal Impressions, which is the one that's coming out next. But the one after that is called Bloody Royal Princes in London. And I'm going to move the crowd around, whether they like it or not. And that gives me the scope to keep writing. And I don't think there's any kind of risk or trouble with doing that. I'll tell you what, I go through my mysteries ever so often, and if I find a single book there, and I never bought another one, I give it away because I really want to kind of know it. I want to.
Well, people like to follow. I think people love characters.
Yeah.
When you read a series, you like to come back to those characters. It's like, sitting back down again with your old familiar friends, and you catch up on their lives, and you see what they're doing, and you get to follow, what's happening next with them. That's the big event. The big advantage for me of writing in a series format is you can tell a very broad story. Every individual book has got the mystery. The mystery wraps up. But in my case, I'm writing about a town way up in the Adirondacks in New York State. So it's also a portrait of a town that's increasingly undergoing economic stress. It's about the men and women in the police station. It's about the men and women in Clare's Episcopal Church. It's about the relationship between these two people. And so I have a very broad format to write that. The challenge becomes, as you start getting up there, is you reach a point where you have to say, am I going to make every single book, as completely standalone as I possibly can, which kind of, shackles you in terms of really stretching your characters, letting them grow and change and have stuff happen to them? Or am I going to just lay it out there and trust the readers to follow? And I took the latter route. My first 4 books I tried to keep, so anybody can pick them up. But my 5th, 6th, and 7th book are basically one story chopped up into 3 different parts. And I just try and trust that readers are going to be able to, if you don't, start from the beginning, which obviously you should, if you're going to read them, you should buy the whole set. Probably 2, because you give one of them away, so you want to keep one. But if you're foolish and you don't do it that way, then I put a lot of faith in readers. I think that you're smart enough to be able to pick up the ideas that are going on. Because that's another thing that I want to avoid is the "as you know, Bob" exposition. As you know, Bob, when your wife was killed by a gangster and you descended into alcoholism, and then later was rescued by the love of a fine blonde, co-ed from Hunter College. Everybody's read books that has those statements. Like, really?
Yeah, and the other one is where you've got all the way through to the book, and it's 5 pages from the end, and suddenly you realize that you haven't any idea what the book was about, and somebody tells you for the last 5 pages. It's called the Orient Express Experience. That film. That's the way that was it, and you still run into those kinds of books.
Yeah.
I do what I do. The last page of Restrike goes right to the first page of the next book. And one of the reasons is that I get very annoyed when I read a series and they've gone out and done a bunch of things that I don't know anything about. I want them to be, always in eye. And they help in this one because there are a few pages of fatal impressions right at the last. But the last thing you hear Coleman say in this book, what she wants to do next, is what she's doing when the first page of the next one is. And it's kind of fun for me because I tell you the truth, and people are always asking about process, and mine is really bizarre because I can't write one at a time. I try to have 2 or 3 going at once.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I don't know. They're always asking, me about, how do we get up in the morning and, do it for 5 hours or something. No. David says that it's, how do you describe the way I write? It's, I carry them around with me so that if I've got 30 minutes, I can, get into it. And the people say, well, how can you do that? How can you remember? Well, I can't remember anything else. I hardly can remember my friends' names, but I know what's going on in them.
There are, the thing is that a lot of times people who are prospective writers who want to be writers, they'll come and say, well, because they want to know what's the way, what is the Tao of writing? How can and I really like the best quote that I like is from an author that I like very, very much, Jennifer Cruzy, who I've been a huge fan of for forever. And she also teaches writing at a sort of a master's level. And she says, there are many roads to Oz. And that is very true with writing. When you know a lot of writing, everybody has a different, way of doing it. There are people who can outline everything. They do, just like you did when you were in school and you do A and 1 and little 1 and and people who do that, I could fling myself out a window. It's great. I can sort of blob it on the page. Yes.
I know you're very successful. You've had great success with St. Martin's and 8 books in a row. What's it like living in the shadow of one of Maine's best special ed teachers?
Well, Tim, let me tell you, Tim is a friend of mine and my husband's, and both are special ed teachers, which is what my husband does. Actually, you know what? That has been one of the things that has helped me to have the career that I have, because as you know, we're not at that stage where you sort of, you've got Muffin, and you want to make sure you put lots of time for Muffin.
And you have health insurance.
I've got, yes, exactly. He's got health insurance, but we have 3 kids, and only recently we're now down to 1 at home. But when I started my career, I literally had a baby in arms, and my husband and I both left our legal jobs at about the same time. He was also a lawyer, and went back to do a 1-year program to become certified as a teacher, and then became a special ed teacher. And it's turned out, he followed his bliss, and it's been absolutely wonderful for him. But it turned out to be the perfect thing because, as you know, when you become an author, you wind up doing a lot of this stuff. There's all this traveling and talking with people and stuff, which is fun, but very difficult to do if you've got children at home and there's nobody to look out for them. So it was the perfect timing. It was a perfect timing. He's just going to keep on working until we both qualify for Medicare or something, and then we'll be good.
My wife agrees with you.
Every professional author should have a spouse who can provide, the health insurance.
Also, how do you feel about, you alluded to this before for both of you, that when you walk into a bookstore or a library, there's a literature section. And then there's us. And you kind of alluded to that. It's a little offensive. I understand the whole marketing thing, but we're touching upon human emotions and what normal people go through.
Yeah.
We happen to have dead bodies where, maybe Tom Barada does not, but he's in literature and we're not.
I don't
What do you
do
think
literature,
of
so I don't care. Did that in all those schools I went to.
You're good,
Have
you're
fun.
good with that?
The hell with them.
Right.
If they don't like.
I like books that have a beginning and a center and an end.
Yeah.
And literary fiction doesn't.
Some of it does. I mean, I've read some things that were but you know what I found really frustrating is reading literary fiction where you could just see the author's getting really close to genre, but then they back off. You know what drove me nuts? Snow Falling on Cedars. Beautiful book. But it was like, it could have been such a great mystery. And every time you got close to it being a mystery, you'd be like, oh my God, I'm getting close to a mystery. I better back off. It's like, God damn it, just, make something happen there. So I find that very frustrating. I like books where things happen. I will console myself for my lack of literary respectability by the fact that mysteries are the #2 best-selling type of book in the country. After romance. So, it's sort of, you have to buck up with the not being respectable, but you get massive book sales instead. So, whatever. Yes.
I'd say to you that if all the crime fiction writers moved to Germany and France, they'd be very well respected, as you know, that they do not make, it's really this country that makes the division so clear. And what I always say to people when they say they don't read crime fiction, I say, oh, so you've never read An American Tragedy or Lolita or Crime and Punishment. Joyce Carol Oates was here and said, there's no book written without transgression or crime.
I agree with that statement. I think if you look in almost every sort of fiction, there is a mystery somewhere at the center of it. And it's not necessarily, somebody whose body is floating, in the canal. But there is a mystery, something that needs to be discovered and uncovered and brought to life. And that's what we do in our books. Brilliantly, of course. Yes.
You mentioned earlier that when you were first starting your career, you received a lot of help from fellow writers. Is it your feeling that genre of fiction is more able to be more welcoming and generous in a way that literary fiction is not?
Well, not really running in literary circles, I couldn't accurately reflect what it's like. I can say that being a part of the mystery community is wonderful. We actually, you wind up knowing a huge number of mystery authors. We go to these conferences, we make appearances with each other. It is a
We drink more than the other
We drink
writers.
a lot at the conferences. They never have enough room at the bar. It's very open and welcome. When I was starting out, I had wonderful authors blurb my books. I had people who would come out to do events with me, so I wasn't sitting there with, nobody except the bookstore owner and her mother, which happens. It's never been anything. Now that I'm in a position to, I try to return the favors. I blurb a lot of new or, close to new authors. I try and do, events with untried youngsters like Reba. With a kind of a pay it forward thing. It's a wonderful community to be a part of.
I can't speak to the literary versus the mystery, but I came out of very, very competitive worlds, Wall Street and Harvard Business School and so forth, and all the time. And, it's always, if you're doing well, it's probably you're taking away from me, is kind of the attitude. Well, the difference in all of us who are doing what we're doing, because somebody buys Julia's book does not necessarily mean they're not going to buy my book. If they're both good, or if they're good, and people are interested, they'll get them. It's not a competition. And there is a huge amount of kindness, and I've talked about it today that it's really quite startling if you came out of the kind of background that I have, to find how nice people are in this mystery world. Well, Jonathan has been helping me, and I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody. I knew people who were at the Harvard Business School, who were in Wall Street. So,
Did it worry you for a while? I mean, did you think when people were nice that like later on they stabbed you in the back or something?
I really.
You're waiting for Jonathan to make his move, right?
But I did comment on it to all of the people that I know, because I do think it's exceptional. That there are just not very many kinds of worlds that you can be in where you're treated as well as this. I think it's quite remarkable. And so I can't talk about literary fiction in that regard, but just in the world in general, I think it's strange and wonderful.
I think we probably.
And then you're going
Okay.
to sign books.
Was there? I thought or maybe I was just seeing you fanning. It is warm in here. One
Can we
last
talk
one?
about Jungle Red Writers
Oh, me?
very quickly?
Oh,
Both of you.
Okay, all right. Have you been on Jungle Red?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
You
good.
invited me.
Oh,
It was
good.
wonderful.
I can't remember anything, so I've been okay, so well, one of the things that I do, and we have guests on, is a group blog called Jungle Red Writers, and we have 8 women writers of mystery who we call ourselves the View with Bodies. And so, if you like, and well, it's because one day we'll have this group chat about, one time we had a big chat about deep fried Twinkies and what this meant for, the America of the future. And then we'll have this stuff, guest authors, and then we'll be very serious about writing. And then we'll do another one where we had like an entire chat about what pantyhose are really worth the money, and they really sort of suck it in. And so it's a variety. It's an interesting variety. But of course, one of the things that you like to do is put yourself out there, make yourself available. As authors, I think that we talked about this a little bit last night. Was I talking to you, or maybe it was the people at my table? People, when we were growing up, and some of you were too young to remember this, but some of you were my age, you didn't know anything about authors except what you read in the back, the little back flap of the book. But that's not true nowadays. And people want to find out about their favorite authors. They want to be connected. They want to talk with their favorite authors, or leave Facebook things. And I think that's one of the things that's driving social media. What do you get? I mean, I'm on Facebook. I've got a blog. I've got Jungle Red Writers. What do you do? Do social media?
I do that, but what I'm always more, is the wonderful ways that you now have access to writers. And I'll just tell you one quickly that happened here. Stephen King was recently here. And it was because he doesn't normally do this kind of thing, but it had to do with a charity. And it's a charity that interested us too, so we got to see him. And I should say that when they announced that he was going to be here, they put the tickets up for sale on the internet, and I think it was in 8 minutes it sold out. And because there are a lot of people who really care about him, and also he is so rarely available. And the reason he's so rarely available is he's had a lot of problems with stalkers and so forth. And so I asked why not get a larger auditorium if there were that many people, and he wouldn't do it. And it was pretty wonderful because he brought one of his sons, and he was fabulous and so forth. But the best time was right after, and we got a few minutes to talk to him. And he asked me if I had read that story that was about the King family. It was in the New York Times. It was this long thing.
That was a great story.
And it, just was really on and on and on. And I said yes, and he said, well, what did you think? And I said, I thought it sounded kind of like the Waltons. He said, yes, but in a haunted house. And I immediately fell in love with him because quick. And he said a few other things that I will treasure, having had this experience with him, because this is one of the masters of the genre, He was so clever and so funny. Somebody asked him why at all times he did the sequel, which he's just written. It's called Dr. Sleep.
Yes, yeah, the sequel to The Shining.
And he said he went all the way through all of his books and looked for a character that he really cared what had become of them and what they were doing now. And he decided that the only one that he really cared about finding out what he was doing now was the boy in The Shining. And so that's why he wrote the book. And this is just a charming thing to say. And then to top it all off, and I'm not a person that people do this, he hugged me. And he said today, this is an incredible moment in my life, and I don't even have it on camera. But, you know, only in the world that we live in now can you have that kind of experience. Meaning, you know, a writer like that, and have him say things like, you know, that. It's just wonderful. And when I was growing up in a really hick town in North Carolina, and I dreamed that there was a world like this. And lo and behold, I'm in it.
And you can blog it, Facebook it, tweet it too. So.
Or you can have a friend tweet us. You could, like Jonathan tweeted us.
Tweeted us from last night.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Books are in the back, drinks are in the back. Come say hello to these two women. And
Which is?
Yes, and get your book signed, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, now they can fall down.
I need to work that AC on these nights.